Hello, my name is Carol May Whittick, spiritual life coach and your host of Her Conversations, Tools for the Awakening. Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. This is the optimal state to embody in order to attract our highest desires. What is the awakening? This is the moment in time when humanity rises up out of the darkness. Who is awakening? Each one of us present on earth today, reclaiming our sovereignty, seeking greater possibilities in our reality and looking for solutions. We know being awakened is not a lofty ideal but a necessity. If we can transform ourselves, we can change the world. Guests on Her Conversations will speak to your spirituality, sensuality and soul. Listen to their stories and hear how they are in service to the world. Let their words and these conversations embolden and inspire you. Before I get into this episode, I just want to take a minute to speak about Her Inspirations, which is the sister podcast to this format. In each episode of Her Inspirations, I take an exploration of things that we may encounter as we embark on our spiritual and awakening and personal growth journeys. So recently I've also expanded on that format to include an accompanying weekly email that includes additional notes for meditation, journaling, inspiration, and also links to relevant sources for your deeper learning. So this is your invitation to listen into Her Inspirations. Also use the link in the show notes to join the Her Inspirations mailing list. And when you do, you'll also receive the free Embody Higher Energetic Resonance course. My guest this week is Dilshad Mehta. Dilshad is a liberation coach, a ritual hostess, and a deep release guide, jewelry artist, and budding herbalist. She works with women who feel stuck and want a complete liberation, both outer and inner. She's a champion of mature spirituality and an advocate for the feminine in all aspects of life. She matured into the spiritual field through a series of traumatic encounters with full spirituality. Her mission is to uphold and protect life with a capital L. During our conversation, Dilshad talks about spiritual introjection, what it is and how to move through it, the need for spiritual maturity, the prevalence of toxic New Age thought and religion that is masquerading around as spirituality. And we also talk about spiritual terminology, which is confusing, disempowering, or often adopted to create an air of superiority. So as always, I begin by asking my guests, Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. When do you feel that higher energetic resonance?
I feel it when I tap into the beauty of a moment. It's like when I slow down. Let's put it that way. When I slow down, I feel it the most then, because I feel like most of my life and also just in general now, there's a push for fast. There's a push for quick. There's a push for just get it out. Just do it kind of attitude. And for me, slowing down allows me to savor things as opposed to just do things. It's the difference between creation and productivity.
Nice picture in my mind there.
Mm-hmm.
So before we kind of get into the meat and bones of our conversation, please just share with us about your journey and what brought you to the space that you are now and the service that you're doing now. What were the things that happened in your life? What was the moment of transformation or moments of transformation that really turned it around for you?
Okay. So I have a rough idea of what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to tell my story from that perspective. Mm-hmm. And I think I was born with squishiness, more like a sponge. And that's how I felt like other people had skin and I didn't have skin. I was just exposed all the time. It felt like I did not understand or even like anything related to spirituality or what I thought was spirituality, but actually what I was rebelling against was religion. And so I poo-pooed it all. I was extremely scientific and analytical about everything. And when I was around 17, when I was around 12, I think is when I read The Alchemist. And that was the first turning point for me. The way he introduced being intimate with life, which is what I said, that's when I feel a higher energetic resonance, being intimate with life. He introduced that intimacy that was so naturally part of my soul. So that was the first turning point where I shifted out of patriarchal, colonialist, racist, and misogynistic views about God and spirit, and shifted more into right relationship with spirit. And that's when it started. And then it went into another pivotal moment was around the age of 19 when I had my first psychic reading, and it was a black magic, dark, really horrible experience that was very traumatic. And I couldn't understand what was going on. It was like straight out of a horror movie. Mm. When I calmed down after that event, which took about a year or two, I began to understand that if this person uses this power for such evil, imagine what you could use this power for good. I had the maturity to understand that it was not psychic work that was the issue or spirituality that was the issue. It was how it was used, because power is a neutral force. It can be used one way or the other. And it piqued my interest that this was actually something that we could use in a positive way. That was a second turning point. And then the third turning point was when I went through a series of really, really dark, evil, narcissistic, cruel spiritual teachers. It was one after the other. It just never stopped. It felt like there were very few that were actually authentic. And it was really traumatizing, one after the other, to go through them. I have my thoughts as to why I went through them. But the biggest and most latest turning point was when I had a teacher project her issues onto me and tell me that I was all the things she was. And it just completely destroyed my self-confidence and my self-esteem. And it made me feel like I was a really awful person. And I already had that to begin with at the back of my mind, that I was evil, I was wrong, I was bad, I was stupid, I was incompetent. And she just made it, the words she specifically said, she was like, oh, Dilshad, you are going to become one of those guru types. You're going to become, you're in danger of spiritual tourism. You don't take this seriously. And this was right before I told her that I was feeling really depressed and anxious and like I was in this really low place. And that was her response to me. And so it completely destroyed me. That was until my best friend at the time, who herself had her own issues similar to this spiritual teacher, but I don't know what came through her, but when she heard what this teacher said about me, she just went full warrior woman and said, this is not who you are. You are a good person. You are a great person. Look at all of the things you've done for me, for other people, etc. And that was a real big turning point because I moved away from this really sick sense of spirituality. And I moved more into believing in my own goodness, which is something that I had never done up to that point. And so in a way, she was the best teacher ever, even though she taught me through trauma. And now I prefer not to learn through trauma, so I don't. But that was a significant turning point. So I would say the main turning points were introduction into intimacy as a spiritual concept. And then secondly, introduction to false spirituality, and that being my only experience for the longest time. And then introduction to the spirit within and my own goodness within. And I think those were the three main turning points as far as this conversation goes.
Mm-hmm. The part that kind of really all of it kind of leaps out to me, and that's one of the reasons that I reached out to you anyway, to speak about specific things. But spirituality, because there's such a desire for it, even on an unconscious level. I feel that people are crying out for something they may not even know what it is really, and then those that step forward then start to take steps into the spiritual world or spirituality, and will go through so many different experiences, and maybe we'll make it through, or we'll get kind of like kind of stuck at certain points, either by, you know, they've found something that kind of gives them the opportunity to kind of stay in a safe feeling space and bypass going any further or any deeper, or then they have the experience, because I'm not going to name it either way, of then meeting someone like you did like that, who offers them almost like a fast track of learning, because it's such a narcissistic, you know, that like for anyone, you know, I've had my experience of a narcissistic entanglement, let's put it this way, and you know, in hindsight then you can see how much growth it gave you. It strips you right down to everything, and it gives you an opportunity for growth. But, you know, in the center of it, in the midst of it, you don't feel any of the lessons, because it really pulls everything out of you and questions everything that you are. And there's a lot of guruship in the spiritual community, and many people, it seems, long for guruship. Really, it's almost like there's a transference of when you've kind of realized that you can't get what you want from the world, i.e., you know, you're not kind of following your favorite celebrities anymore, or the books, like you're just not getting what you used to get externally. You move to spirituality and it feels different, but the kind of the process is set up the same, and that wound, or that part of you that needed an external validator and tutor, then is then replaced by spiritual teachers who oftentimes are narcissistic in nature. Do you see where I'm coming from with that as well, and how it's really affected many people's growth and moving forward on that?
Yeah, it really has. And this is why I want to reclaim the word guru and what it's supposed to be and what it's become. To me, the guru is the highest form of a teacher. It comes from India, and the highest form of a teacher is someone who embodies their principles so completely that they require very, very little words to teach. Their energy is the instruction. And so that's why you sit with a guru. You don't sit with them to learn. You sit with them to absorb in ways, and that's the fast track. If you want the fast track, that's the fast track. Why do you think people say that you are the sum total of 5 people you most hang out with? Why do you? It's because the best way to transcend, forget transcend, let's not use that word anymore. The best way to transform whatever you're going through is to surround yourself with people who've already been through it, come out the other hand, living it and living well. That's just another way of saying the word guru. And I'm not saying they don't use words or something like that. We obviously need words in our Western world and all of that, but it's more that somebody who embodies this essence so completely. So in a sense, the number one quality of a guru is integrity. The number one quality of a guru is authenticity on high, like on authenticity on steroids, because your energy is the instruction. You know, a lot of times I see people doing all this, you know, nonsense with these sage wands and, you know, this crystal and that crystal and dabbing all over to get rid of, you know, bad energy. And it's like, if you embodied the energy of liberation or release or cleansing, these things don't really affect you that much. And you don't need all these props to go around and sort of, you look kind of like a cartoon, you know, the way you go about it. I'm sorry, but it really looks cartoonish. No wonder so many people don't trust spirituality, because they're looking at you and they're seeing how you're behaving. And this is not, I mean, we all have to start there, right? We all have to start there. But some people stay there and then develop a superiority complex or think that that's the only way to do, when the goal, if there is a goal for spirituality, which there isn't, but if there is one, it is to become the guru. It is that. And we need to reclaim that word and put it in its rightful place. But also to your point about what you said about people needing gurus. Yes, people need gurus. And here's why. We are living in a world where there are very few adults. There are very few adults in this world. There's no eldership. People get old, but they don't become an elder. And that's changing slowly, but there are no adults here. And that's number one. And so we're thirsting for elders, for wisdom, for wise people. The second thing is that I talk a lot about liberation work. That's what I do. I liberate women. And part of that liberation involves understanding what systems you have been part of and how they have hurt you. And the number one thing for women, and also for everyone in the world, is the system of education and how we have been taught and what we have been taught. So if I have been taught that I'm an idiot because I don't relate to math, then I'm going to believe I'm an idiot. When the truth is, a real guru, a real mentor, a real teacher is someone who looks at you and draws out what is your inner strength and puts it on a platter and says, look at it. Look at it. Now practice it, So a lot of true initiation into spirituality, a lot of true initiation into eldership, into adulthood, revolves around not hyper-focusing on your weaknesses, because you're always going to have them, but instead amplifying your strengths so that your weaknesses don't become, and I'm talking strengths and weaknesses in this polarizing term, but I don't really mean like you're weak. It's just like the things that are not so great about you are not forward. They're more like, okay, they're in the background. You can deal with them as they come, but your strengths become, this is the light and love part of the equation. This is the light. Your light is your strength. And that a lot of things in spirituality and everything else, they don't focus on building strengths. And that's why people are thirsting for gurus and teachers. And I think it's only right that they do. But also they need to be careful.
And kind of to just tack on to spirituality and words and terms. And one of the things that I heard from you when I was looking into your work was the word introjection. I'd not heard that phrase before. I was just curious to really understand from your research and from your standpoint and your guidance what that means. And I'm going to leave it to you to kind of go into it in depth.
Nobody talks about this, especially not in a spiritual context, and it's like very little even in a psychological context. So I really want to be talking about this all the time. In fact, that's what I'm going to do for the next few weeks. And an introjection, everyone talks about projection, and you're projecting onto me, and they're projecting and projecting. And introjection is kind of the opposite of projection, if you want to think of it that way, where instead of, so if you were projecting onto someone, you're projecting your stuff onto them. You're saying they have it when it's actually you that has it. Introjection is you noticing what somebody else has and then unconsciously adopting it as your own with minimal effort and sometimes with hardly any thought. And sometimes you don't even know that which you have adopted is actually an adoption. It's not you. So you don't even know that that's not you. You might find out days, hours, years later that was actually not you. And so I'm not a psychologist by any means, but I have lived through this. And I feel like that is some of the best experience to talk about this stuff, because it is a really scary thing. It is scary because you literally have no idea who you are, because you're kind of a collage or a patchwork job of everyone you've ever met, including everyone from a grocery store clerk to your best friend. It doesn't matter who it is. And what's funny is that I don't know if this is truly the definition of introjection, what I'm about to say. You're not adopting somebody else's moral system. So that's the best part. You're not adopting their integrity or morality. You're simply looking at their personality qualities or their habits or their mannerisms and thinking those are your own. Introjectors, if that's even a word, they assume that what they see in others is in them. Mm. And in my case, and I suspect in most people who do this, they think that all the bad things they see in other people is in them. Specifically the bad qualities or the awful qualities, the evil qualities in other people, they assume is in them. Mm-hmm. So an example of like an extreme example of this that I will give you is like, I remember very clearly, I was around 7 or 8 years old and I was sitting in front of the TV in Dubai, and I was watching TV, and the news came on, and it was about some tsunami that, you know, destroyed the city. I don't know where it was, but I just remember watching the waves hit the hit stuff, and it was a vague memory of watching these waves hit stuff. And I remember thinking, oh, that is because of me. I caused the tsunami because I am so angry and I'm such a bad person. So it doesn't even have to be a person that you adopt these attitudes. It could be the water, it could be the air, it could be a dog, it could be a plant. Like it's a really strange thing to have, and but it's a thing. And so so I'll stop there. And and also one of the things that was very telling now looking back is I remember a guy that I was dating. He was like, wow, you're like a mirror. Like you just mirror everything back to me. And I didn't exactly know what he meant, but that should have, if I knew about introjection, that would have been like my first sign. Oh, I'm introjecting. So yeah. And then, and one other thing I'm going to say is that, especially for someone who is prone to introjection, sexual activity can be extremely dysregulating for the nervous system, because you're literally taking in energy from someone else, and that can be so entwined in you that causes even more suffering down the road. And there have been multiple times where I've had sex with men and then wondered why I'm acting in this overly aggressive, angry way, you know, for like months or years later. And I'm like, oh wait, that's actually not me. So yeah.
When comes the moment of awareness? You know, if there gets to a point where like you gave that example of that you're taking on the anger of previous partners, and then to be able to go, oh, actually, hang on a moment, that's not who I am. When you come to that moment of awareness, or how does one come to that moment of awareness if they don't have self-awareness? Like, do they continue, you know, like years down the line, acting out in this way that is not the core self of them? How do they then transform out of that into true self? What is that process?
Yeah. So the first thing is recognizing that the reason they do this is because they don't have a sense of self. There is no self at all. And they might think that they know themselves very well and they have attitudes and stuff, but the self that I'm talking about, and goes back to what I was saying, is the self that where they have been encouraged and proven back to them what their innate strengths and qualities are, specifically, not their flaws. They are already hyper aware of their flaws, and that's the problem. And they're so hyper aware of it that they see other people's flaws and they think those are their flaws as well. So you have to build a strong sense of self. Otherwise, it's just impossible to recognize it, even in the moment when it's happening. And even now, there are times when I don't recognize when it's happening, but I've gotten so good at just releasing energy that it just happens automatically now. But I do have a practice where it's general releasing. Like, I don't know where I picked this up from. It doesn't even matter where, who, what, why, what the story or the drama is. I don't care. What matters is that it's not me. I release it. I release it. And so I've gotten very good with that work. And so that's why, like, I focus so much on liberation, because I truly believe that that's the way we go about it. That's the way we go about spirituality. But the number and you know, building up strengths and the true self is the long game. You're not going to be able to fast track that. But so in the meantime, it's going to take a while, but it's a worthy pursuit.
Now, as I'm listening to you explain deeper what introjection is, a thought crossed my mind. Is like what you're saying, people taking on the negative aspects of things and believing that it is themselves because they lack self-awareness. And the thought that popped into my mind is like, well, that just sounds like most people in the world, like that are living in it, especially that lack of self-awareness, where you're looking outside of yourself and pulling out the negative, the worst aspects, and like embodying them and deciding that that's you, because for the most part, the world is not going to show you what's good about you, because, if people start to then recognize their strengths, and as all of our strengths are individual and unique to us, so then imagine like now what revolution and mayhem that would cause if everyone then starts to awaken to themselves and realize how amazing they are, how unique they are, and how the benefit of them actually stepping into who they are and their unique gifts and their unique pluses. What a difference that would make. And I'm talking for the positive. I'm being slightly sarcastic, so I hope that comes across, but just seeing that is this more common than we think, like on an everyday basis, like everyone walking around the world, like especially when you're saying that there are no adults here. There are no adults here, One of the things I would say that is of constant surprise to me as I've gotten older, I always imagined that I'd be able to sit down and have deep, meaningful chats with like women of my age and women older, and like, have this kind of like wisdom fed down. And what has surprised me more has been the lack of that. And then, taking into account that often I'm speaking to someone who's in their late 50s, 60s, and I have to just go, hang on, I'm speaking to a teenager here, and that in itself is super jarring, because you're seeing, someone who's physically outwardly looks older, even though they're doing their best not to, again, the kind of the child inside. But yeah, going back to the previous point, is like introjection, like a modern day phenomena, like if you would say in the world itself.
Everyone introjects when they are a child. And it is a natural part to some extent of development, but there are people like me who just get stuck in there and never really get out of it. And like I said, it can be very extreme, like thinking you caused a natural disaster, or thinking somebody died because of you, or thinking that somebody was murdered or sexually assaulted because of you. That is a more extreme side of things, but this is a spectrum. This is a spectrum, and since it's not talked about enough, honestly, we don't know how many people are going through this and how many people could relate to this in some way or another. Nobody really talks about it as much. And so it's something that the more I talk about it, the more I put it out there in the world, I will be able to see what that's like. But from what I have talked, the people that I surrounded myself with for so long, they couldn't relate to what I was saying. So that's why I thought it was something that was a little bit more rare. But it could not be. I don't really know. I do think that it is in some way more common than I thought, because we are coming into an era of where everybody's boundaries are getting squishy, where we're hyper connected in some ways. We're coming together as a species in some ways, and we're all getting more sensitive in some ways. And so maybe we will see more people introjecting than normal. But there is a difference between positive merging and codependent merging. And just negative merging, where you just, there are differences. There is a way to be a positive introjector and use that to your advantage if that's who you are. But the way it relates in a spiritual context, and this is purely from my experience that I'm talking, is that I think people who have introjection as one of their core personality traits are usually coming from a place where they remember a time where they were once connected to all there is. And then they incarnated into a human body. And that separation was too jarring, too traumatic for them to process in some ways. And so they subconsciously try to regain that oneness as they go about the world. in this subconscious desire to merge with other people and things, if they've had a childhood that was particularly traumatic, and they're not seeing evidence of their goodness and their strengths and their good qualities, then the introjection becomes all about merging the bad parts about other people inside of them. Because again, you're connected to all there is. There is no judgment there about what's bad or what's good. You're just looking for that connective quality. You're desperate for that unity. And so I do believe that that's where this comes from.
So let's talk about another word that is very popular, empath. And you know, and how that gets taken on. You know, I hear it taken on in so many different ways, and maybe to an extent, or you know, maybe up until a certain point I would have said that I'm an empathic person, and not, you know, and not be trying to wear it as any kind of like badge of honor, you know, or as any kind of like overly sensitive a way of like not being able to manage being in the world. I like kind of like use that word less and less now, if ever, simply because it's kind of gone so far down another path that many people who are describing themselves as empathic then don't necessarily display empowered behaviors or, you know, any kind of strength. What are you seeing in that, and does that have any parallels with introjection?
So this is where I crack down, right? So like I said, we're going into an era where we are becoming more sensitive to each other. Some of us are becoming telepathic. Some of us are becoming empathic. Like whatever, we are all becoming path something, where we're connecting to other people on much deeper levels than what we thought was even possible, or that we've been taught is even something that we can do as people. You know, telepathy is seen as this really weird thing that, you know, only happens in sci-fi movies, and that's actually not true. A lot of us are telepathic. We just don't think that we are. And so when it comes to being an empath, first of all, yes, it is a thing. It is a thing. And I do think introjection is a more extreme form of being an empath. However, the difference between being an empath and introjection is that introjection is very unconscious, and you don't realize it for quite a while. Empaths traditionally know when they're taking on energy, when it's happening in the moment. And traditionally, empaths are seen as more people who take it on physically, like they can feel it in their body. That's traditionally how empaths have been described. Now, as to how people have been interpreting being an empath and they use it, what I have seen more often than not is that empaths present themselves as victims all the time, and they are victimized by the world. They are so sensitive, so everyone should walk around on eggshells around them. Everyone should, speak in soft yoga teacher voices, because otherwise, their nervous system will get dysregulated and they'll take on your energy. And there's all this nonsense about what other people should be doing in order to accommodate their empathness, which in a way is a form of superiority. It's a form of validating your ineffectiveness in the world. And this is what being a victim looks like. Because, nobody wants to be empowered, because then you have to take a lot of responsibility for your actions, your words, your thoughts, and your behavior. And you might have to stand up for things that you would otherwise prefer to be invisible about. And that's why people use empathness as kind of like a special badge for other people to treat them well, rather than understanding that empathness means radical responsibility that you have to now take, not just for yourself, but for recognizing the energy in other people, because you are literally the first responder. Mm-hmm. If life was an ambulance, if life was like a trauma room, or like let's say, like if life was like a car accident on the highway, you as an empath would be the ambulance driving as a first responder to that place. And being sensitive does not mean that you can just say that you are a delicate darling. You know, it's not the same thing. And so the thing I want to say, there was something I wanted to say about empaths, and now I forgot. But yeah, there's a victimhood that I just don't subscribe to. In fact, when I was called an empath, I hated it because I saw what other people were doing in the name of being an empath, and I was like, no, that's not me.
Yeah. No, I align with that completely. And that's why, because the whole thing of like feeling that, the visual that came to my mind was the canary in the coal mine, you know, like they're the one that gets kind of sent down to kind of see if it's toxic or not. But, you know,
yeah.
you know, but they, you know, more times than not come back. So you're not going to just send them into certain destruction, like you say, you're at the front lines, you're feeling into what's going on, but then if you're at the front lines, you have to then find a way to either communicate how people need to react or kind of feed back to them what it is what it is that they're about to encounter, like, and using your visual of the first responder, you're the one who's going to then put the tape around it and get, you know, work out how close people are strong enough to stand to the point of crisis, you know. But then for some reason it's kind of become this like, like you say, the world is too much for me, everything's too heavy, I can't be around you, or, you know, just and it then makes it difficult for you to get into any kind of adult, you know, we're talking about the children, like level of adulting with people who then want to go like, it's too, I'm empath, I'm empathing today, and it's all the things that get then taken on to validate someone's lack of ability to either regulate or find their own strength, or their willingness to do the work, you know, whatever the level of work or building up or self-awareness is. And unfortunately, there are very useful props and tools and terminology within the spiritual world that then allows people to kind of take these things on, and it looks very pretty. And for anyone who hasn't seen it enough time to get weary of it and wary of it also, then you'll kind of like step back, or you kind of fall into line around someone who's just, you know, I just can't today, there's just too much, it's too heavy, it's too dark, it's too, sometimes it is, but, you know, but then why then bring that to somebody else who didn't necessarily invite that in, you know? Like, it's for us as individuals to find, in my opinion, it's for us as individuals to find our core and our strength, or then to find the right guru energy to then show us the levels of ourselves where we are strong, where we can actually be in this world, and then be able to kind of put what people call their flaws into perspective, without then kind of pushing them down into a shadow as well. You know, there's that balance of recalibrating yourself so that you're coming through as a feeling being, as a spiritual being, as a powerful being, but then not bypassing or denying the parts of yourself that maybe not necessarily to bring forward to the fore.
Yeah, no, I'm just listening to you, and it's, you know, that what you're talking about right there is judgment, and how people use spirituality as a weapon to like hurt other people and judge them. And I don't know why, but so much of fake spirituality is focused on infantilizing adult people, and, you know, making them feel justified in remaining babies. And, you know, maybe that comes across as a judgment, but I'm telling you right now, if your spirituality does not help you grow up, it is not spirituality at all. So many people need to feel special. And so they turn to all these labels like starseed, empath, light worker. And it's like, yeah, you could be all those things. And maybe there is a basis for all those things. But if you use that as a weapon against other people, that is not spirituality. That is narcissism.
Right.
That is narcissism. And again, because that's another buzzword. So let me describe narcissism before. Narcissism is a necessary trait to have when you are growing up as an adult. Everyone goes through a narcissistic phase. Think of a teenager. It's normal. The world revolves around you and you're kind of like trying to figure out who you are. That's normal, but you have to get out of it at some point. And when you stay there, that's when it becomes the problem, because it is all about service at the end. Your life is never your own. And just realize that, like, as the world is changing, the world is changing. Everyone is going to be an empath. Everyone is going to be everyone is intuitive. Everyone has what you think is so special about you. They just don't know they have it, and they don't have the words to describe it a lot of times. So it's another way of saying I'm just human. I'm an empath. I'm just human. But I'm going to a place with the world where, I am now more connected than ever with other humans.
Yeah, there's been a real uptick. I think we spoke briefly before about, especially the labeling and using the labeling and having that then that superiority kind of labeled down at you, because I've encountered it, and I hope to goodness that I've not gone through that myself, or maybe I have. I can see, if I'm being honest, especially in early days when I was starting to learn things and kind of find a different level of being, that there was oh, look where I am and I'm doing this, and but then ultimately it gets to a point where it doesn't serve.
Yeah, that was your teenager phase. You needed to go through that because it was your teenager phase with spirituality. It's something that is not really taught. So we all needed to go through that. But a lot of people stay there, and you cannot stay there.
Yeah. But there seems to be, in this work and in this world, I do often encounter that spiritual superiority, people who've really taken on those labels of being the higher dimensional whatevers, and everyone else, even if you've been doing your own exploration and your own work for 20 or 30 years, a conversation then almost becomes a battle of well, I read this book and I went on this course and I did this ceremony and I did this thing and I did this cleansing and I'm always forgiving, and I'm and the one exchange that someone always used to kind of spin it around with me, and I'd be like, I just thought we were having a conversation. It'd be you're in your head again, you're in your head, you're not talking from your heart now, and really it's well, I'm having to think about stuff. That's a problem, but I'm never not in my heart these days. Rarely am I not trying to do good and trying to translate and transmit some level of care and kindness. Sometimes I get pushed to the end, and it's going to come out the sides, and it's not going to be necessarily all sweetness and light and fairy tales and the love and light language, the light fluffy bunny that you want to hear. Sometimes it needs to come out firmly, but it doesn't mean that it's coming from any other place other than than the energy that it needs to be reciprocated, especially when I find that I'm encountering levels of superiority and it seems to the experiences that I've had are for people who've been on this journey for a long time. I can recognize it with people who are new and they're trying on all the things, and literally trying on all the things, trying all the garments and wearing all the things and buying all the scents and taking all of that stuff. And then there comes a point where there's some sort of shift, and it usually happens when life kind of brings them out of that initial euphoric phase of getting into spirituality, and then life happens. It's now can you use everything that you've learned to deal with the life lesson that is being presented to you? Is it working for you, or are you just going to pretend that it's not happening and just kind of stay in your bubble and use whatever tools that you've got? Because I can see how it's possible. There are many practices that will just keep you slightly removed from real life. If you want to, you don't have to feel it. You can be off in a different space, in a different reality by using all of these things. But the ones that manage to kind of see how it kind of plays into their life and makes them richer, become richer, fuller people for it, and are the real ambassadors that you want in spirituality. But then there are people who get really, really stuck. And, you know, I often wonder, because the thing is, a lot of the time, what I found is it's difficult to then have a deep conversation with someone when you see that they're going off into this identity that they've built for themselves, that they are the most evolved version of, you know, wherever, you know, whatever level of dimensional being that they come from, whatever's that. Then you're like, well, why don't you want to be, you know, especially when people just don't want to be in the world. Oh, I can't wait to leave the world. I don't want to be here anymore. I'm waiting for, you know, whoever to come and take me and shift me off into this new space. I'm like, but you're here now, though. What is it about here that you don't want to? You're missing out on your own existence. It's like you may as well have been completely unconscious to spirituality and all the new things, because then you're using it to be as unconscious to the reality of where you are than just having stayed in, you know, the normal life where that doesn't even happen upon you. And to add to your words as well, there are people that I've met that wouldn't consider themselves to be spiritual or to have a spiritual outlook or know any of the terms, that are living the most spiritual lives ever, you know, just on a real like innate level, purely from the heart, seeing things in all the ways, and, you know, would probably like be horrified if you brought it to them, but you see like a pureness in them when it comes to spirituality, and especially with coaching, is to allow people to kind of delve into, or tell me about the experiences that you've had, but what works for you on a real level, because we're here. So what can you do about being here and not kind of flying off into any ego, or kind of using any words to like blame or shame anyone, or even yourself. Like, how does it work in your work, and how you work with the people that you work with, and how you guide them through their growth and transformation?
Yeah. So essentially what this whole conversation, right, it's been about one thing, it's spiritual maturity. Mm-hmm. It's about maturing into spirituality and what that looks like, and why, and the reason why we need spirituality is so that we can make this life resemble the ideals and the notions of spirit. It's not separate from you. It's an embodied, lived experience. And so if your spirituality is only about connecting to aliens, and then saying that you are a Palladian or an Arcturian, and then when you stand in line at a grocery store and somebody is moving slower than you like, and all your Arcturian flies out your ears, and suddenly you're just a raging bitch. Like, where did the Arcturian go? Like spirituality does not start and end on a meditation pillow. And so to your question on like how I guide clients, is that I really encourage them to live their spirituality. So first of all, there is a lot of work that I do on kind of picking out their false notions of spiritual work. And because most of my clients are spiritually oriented, and I do love to work with people who are not they're their own kind of person. Those people are amazing, but just removing their notions of spirituality, you know, first, and then helping them understand how this has hurt them rather than helped them. And then from there on, using those new concepts to now say, go practice this out in the world. Go practice it out in the world. You know, because my purpose statement is I create heaven on earth. And that purpose statement involves helping other people bring that heaven, or what they think is so high up there, down to earth. And actually heaven and earth are one and the same, where you're living the values that you want to see. You're living your spirituality out in the world. So I focus a lot on action, but inspired action, intuitive action, spiritual action. So that is something that I feel like a lot of spiritual people don't focus on, is action, because their spirituality is not practical. It's not meant to be lived and embodied. It's only meant to be euphoric and experienced in a yoga retreat, and then afterwards, nothing.
Mm. So we're gonna tie up today, but I want to say thank you for like really opening up this new aspect as well. And I hope that more people, you know, you get the opportunity to spread the message, and
thank you.
You're finding far and wide, so that a new conversation can be had. But importantly, really about that, the idea of spiritual maturity, and just maturity in general as beings, like allowing it, like, you know, we do all need to grow up. For as long as we remain in our immaturity, then it's opening us to being led down the garden path, really, because we don't have any claim on who we are and what we're able to do. So that's my wish for everyone always. So if you have anything to share it. Let everyone know also where they can connect with you and work with you.
Yeah, just on my website. You just go to dilshadmehta.com. I'm not much of a social media person, so I don't really post on social media, but dilshadmehta.com. There, I just released this 7-day liberation retreat for 7, and I guarantee anyone that goes through it, they'll be a different person by the time they get out. So it's just a way to kind of, I think it came from this part of me that was introjecting so much, and I needed release practices that would work immediately and in the moment and not on a meditation cushion. And so that's where this came from. And I think it's really helpful to anyone who identifies as particularly sensitive or empathic, or just feels like they're carrying around a heavy burden. So yeah, I highly recommend taking that 7-day challenge.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing with me, Dilshad, today. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Dilshad, for joining me on this conversation, and thank you for listening. Once again, I invite you to tune in to Higher Energetic Resonance Inspirations. There's a link in the show notes for you to use so that you can hear that podcast on your preferred platform. Also, a link to the Higher Energetic Resonance mailing list, which will send an exclusive email to you weekly for additional notes that accompany each of the episodes. If you want to find out more about working one-on-one with me, the link is there for my Higher Energetic Resonance one-on-one spiritual life coaching. Find out more about me on my website, carolmaywhittick.com, carolmaywhittick.com. Find me on Facebook under the name Carol May Whittick, on Instagram, Kazmic, Cazmick. Wishing you the best of weeks. Speak to you on the next episode. Take care. Bye.